and welcome again. This video is a message from the Commonwealth Constitutional Alliance. This is advice to the CEOs or administrators of all corporations or commercial enterprises of the true nature of law in the British Commonwealth since the invocation of Article 61 of Magna Carta 1215 on the 23rd of March 2001. Very few of the Australian population are aware of the fact that there has been no lawful government in this country since the early days of the Whitlam administration in 1973. At that time, without any consultation with we the people, the Commonwealth of Australia was unlawfully sold to and registered on the US Securities and Exchange Commission, pursuant to the Securities Exchange Act of 1934. The registration number of the Commonwealth of Australia on that exchange is CIK 0000805157. Following that action, the actions of all succeeding Australian governments have unlawfully eroded our rights as free subjects of the British Crown by incrementally turning Australia into a de facto corporate state. The following partial extract of a statement is circulating on social media and sources of information alternative to the mainstream media, informing people of the parlous state of Australian governance. Quote, "Over many decades, those in government have deliberately eroded our rights, going against the will of the people, removing constitutional laws and processes in place that limited the power of government and protected us, and turned Australia into a corporation. They did this without any discussion or debate with we the people. They did this without informing we the people of the Commonwealth of Australia what was going on and planned. They did this without the consent of we the people. The government does not have the authority to sign away the sovereignty of the people. Any attempt to do so is treason. When you fully see and understand the level of deception that has been perpetrated against we the people of the Commonwealth of Australia, you will view our current situation with new eyes. Every state and every government department has been turned into a corporate entity. Easily proven, does it have an ABN? There is no justice, as there is no lawful authority to administer a service to we the people. It is all a big charade to fool the unsuspecting Australian public, think Wizard of Oz, while corporate employees masquerading as government work in the background, behind the curtain, to strip more of our rights away, to gain more control and enrich themselves and their families in the process. Rip back the curtain. We are not contracted to this corporation. We do not have to comply with anything the corporation tells us, demands of us, orders us, or mandates us to do. The government corporations are not living entities. They are a business at best, and at worst, it is a criminal corporate entity posing as our government." End quote. Some of those receiving this communication will recognise themselves as active participants in the fraud being perpetrated and the widespread corruption endemic in all levels of Australian polity and so-called public service. For them, this serves as a warning. For the innocent, mostly advice. However, all are advised to treat the information herein as a warning, either of impending reckoning and retribution, or of increasing threats to the liberties of ourselves and our children. We will spell out the lawful situation as it now stands. It is imperative that all who are involved in the criminal usurpation of Crown authority, from the highest ranking politicians or members of the judiciary, down through the police, even to the lowliest pen pusher in an obscure government department, it isn't really so if it has an ABN, understand that they are equally liable for aiding and abetting the treason. Their influence and therefore their potential retribution may vary, but the principle of behaving treasonously applies to all, especially when they have been advised of the law. It's also vital to understand that there can be no viable legal system without there being a lawful authority on which it is based. Australia is a member nation of the British Commonwealth, and as such is under the English Democratic Common Law Constitution, which is embodied in the 1215 Magna Carta. Magna Carta was sealed decades before there existed any parliament in England. Thus, as a treaty between the monarch and his peers, the barons, with clauses both protective and inclusive of the rest of the subjects, it is immune from parliamentary amendment, annulment, or revocation. Despite this, there has been centuries of obfuscation and subterfuge, led by those who seek to control the lives of others, rather than protecting their rights to live in peace and liberty, to hide this understanding and the power that it grants to every Crown subject to be in control of the government and to thus be truly governed by consent, as opposed to arbitrary edicts, mandates, acts, or statutes. This situation came to a head during the reign of Queen Elizabeth II. She swore in her coronation oath to protect the rights and liberties of the subjects of the Commonwealth by governing, quote, according to their laws and customs, end quote, explicitly omitting the phrase, quote, according to the acts and statutes of Parliament, end quote. This was correct, but she then failed to honour that oath by repeatedly allowing Parliament to pass legislation granting increasing sovereignty over Britain to the European Union. That is in flagrant and direct contravention of the British Constitution, and Elizabeth was duty-bound to deny royal assent to such treasonous bills. Eventually, the point was reached whereby it became necessary to petition the Queen, under provisions of Article 61 of Magna Carta, for the denial of royal assent to the amendment to the European Union Act of 1972, which would have permitted the ratification of the Treaty of Nice, which in turn would have permitted foreign troops and police onto British soil with power to compel British subjects. Under Article 61, the Queen had 40 days to redress this treason, which she failed to do, thereby leaving the Committee of Barons established under the provisions of Article 61 with no alternative other than to invoke said article. The constitutional effect of that action was that the highest office in the land was made vacant until such time as these treasons are redressed, at which time all subjects are to resume their normal allegiance to the monarch. Consequently, since that date, March the 23rd, 2001, there has been no lawful Crown authority anywhere in the British Commonwealth. The main effect of this on those reading this is twofold. One, we are all under specific royal command to distress and distrain the Crown, refusing to support those purporting to be Crown authorities, otherwise known as the government, by withholding funding and refusing to comply with any legislation or mandates emanating from those claiming to represent the Crown. Indeed, this includes seizing buildings which are purportedly for government purposes until they are once again put to their proper uses. The use of violence, however, is forsworn. We are all still subject to the common law of the land, which is summed up in the 4 tenets: do no harm, cause no loss, commit no fraud, and keep the peace. 2, we are all bound by the exercise of our reason to research and understand the law as it is and always has been, because as we all know, ignorance of the law is no excuse. There are links after this document to all the evidence needed to affirm the facts here asserted. These evidences are sent to various people, allegedly acting as public servants, who are attempting to pretend that Article 61 was not invoked and to carry on as if nothing has happened. Such actions are axiomatically treasonous, and anyone supporting them is guilty of either compounding treason or committing it from ignorance. The files thus compiled will be used as evidence in trials before jury upon the restoration of a lawful judicature. The implications of this are extremely serious, especially for those seeking to prolong the unlawful status quo or to otherwise profit from it, as they are guilty of treason of the highest order. There will eventually be trials for these offenders, and the penalty for treason has always been the gallows. For those who commit the lesser crime of sedition, which is publicly denying in writing or by their actions that the Constitution is valid, the penalty is life in prison with full asset stripping, which extends to the family. The number of people becoming aware of these facts is growing, and it is going to grow much more rapidly because of the forthcoming coronation of King Charles III. The reason? There are a significant number of constitutional students who know that Charles's support of the Great Reset is diametrically opposed to the oath he must swear if he can be lawfully crowned king in early May. The Earl Marshal responsible for the coronation protocols and ceremony, the Duke of Norfolk, has already been informed of these requirements and the necessity for trial by jury to be re-established, along with the practice of denying royal assent to proposed legislation which is repugnant to the Constitution. The Duke knows of these constitutional protocols, and the issue is sure to gain a great deal of traction in various forms of the media, which will greatly accelerate the take-up of this constitutional education amongst the population. How this affects those of you who are in positions of power or influence, either economic or political, will depend very largely on how well you understand the issues under discussion here. We are entering or are already embroiled in a situation without precedent in the history of our nation and Commonwealth. It will either result in the establishment of a global tyranny the like of which we haven't before seen, or, like all previous attempts to establish global tyranny, will come crashing down with exposure of the deception and the resistance of sheer numbers of those who oppose tyranny through adherence to sound moral principles. Those principles consist of what every normally adjusted person knows as their conscience, namely to treat others as one would wish to be treated. There are universal laws of nature, and those who try to cheat their way around them or break them in seeking some unlawful personal profit almost invariably wind up breaking themselves and the ships they are captaining on the jagged rocks of objective justice. You are urged to study the documents made available through the links, as well as the highly informative videos, which are also linked thereby. Those who desire to extricate themselves from lawlessness and into lawful standing for when the Constitution is re-established as the law of the land, are welcome to seek further information on how to proceed from this email address and or from these websites. Thank you for watching.